Hey, what's going on, everyone? How you guys doing today? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is Three Buck Theater, and The Last of Us Part Two is my most anticipated game of the year. It really, really is. This is one that I am absolutely waiting to play. Cannot wait to dive into the crazy world Naughty Dog has created once again. But once it was indefinitely delayed due to the coronavirus, I was bummed. I was very bummed. I wasn't happy. And then yesterday the unthinkable happened. Yesterday the absolute crazy unthinkable happened because The Last of Us Part 2 was leaked online. Not the entire thing, obviously. Not the whole thing, but oh my god, enough of it. Enough of it to make you stop and go, damn it. Damn it, damn it, son of a bitch. Because that's kind of how I feel today. Now, you could also, real quick before we dive into this, you could be asking yourself, but Matt, this is a video game related thing. What are you doing talking about this? This is a movie channel. What are you thinking? Well, look, here's the thing. The Last of Us is currently being worked on as a series at HBO. And back in 2014, so just about 6 years ago, Screen Gems did host a panel at Comic-Con with Sam Raimi and Neil Druckman to talk about the Last of Us movie. And I actually happened to be in the room when that happened, and I was as shocked as anyone else. So yes, this property is encompassing a bunch of different mediums, so it definitely, in my mind, qualifies as content for 3 Buck Theater. This is my channel. I can do what I want. But let's talk about this leak, what it means, potentially who did it, why they did it, and everything else in between. Now, I'm not going to go into spoilers. I am not going to spoil this at all. You have nothing to worry about here. If you want to look that stuff up, by all means, that's entirely up to you. I ain't going to do it, and I'm going to be monitoring the hell out of the comments. So just so you guys know on that one. Now, Inverse here writes, devastating The Last of Us 2 leaks spoil several major Ellie twists. Yes, that is very, very, very true. And Twitter is alive with commentary, with M here saying, I just saw the leaks of The Last of Us Part 2 and LMAO. All I can say is I'm not buying it. And then Miss Anthropony here writes, the current state of Naughty Dog after The Last of Us 2 got leaked and everything's on fire. Now, here's the thing with this. The leaks themselves are not being well regarded. They're not being looked at well by any stretch of the imagination. Most people are looking at them and they are attacking them because of the content contained within. And look, if you know anything about the development of this game and who's behind it, which you trust me when I say we will be talking about, you kind of can understand where things were going, and it is actually a bit of the problem at Naughty Dog itself. Now, Naughty Dog has acknowledged this. And they put out a statement today saying, we know the last few days have been incredibly difficult for you. We feel the same. It is disappointing to see the release and sharing of pre-release footage from development. Do your best to avoid spoilers, and we ask that you don't spoil it for others. The Last of Us Part 2 will be in your hands soon. No matter what you see and hear, the final experience will be worth it. And I hope so, because Sony had to respond to this in some way or another. And so today, they actually upped the release date for The Last of Us Part 2 to June 19th, 2020, whereas Ghost of Tsushima is also being moved to July. And what's weird about that is The Last of Us is taking Ghost of Tsushima's release date, but they were originally going to release The Last of Us Part 2 in May, and that didn't happen at this point. So obviously they're putting these two massive system-selling games, right? These are system sellers, a month apart from each other, leading into the release of the PS5. It's got to be part of their release strategy, but they are scrambling right now to get ahead of this. What they should do, and this is simply my opinion, they should release the game digitally now, if it's done, in order to be able to put the information out there. But then the question becomes, who did it? Who did it? Why? The who, what, when, where, how, why, whatever you want to say. How did this happen? That is the question that everyone is asking, and no one has pure confirmation of. But what we have is a source from a bit of a dubious website, and that's coming in from sausageroll.au. I've talked about these guys before. They don't have the best track record, but they put out an article today titled "The Last of Us 2 gameplay leak came from a dev that hates its divisiveness." Now, this is also part of a narrative. You have to understand this. This is coming in from people who like to push the anti-social justice warrior narrative, the anti-left-leaning narrative, and when it comes to Naughty Dog and who's behind this particular game, his politics are very left-leaning, and so it's been a point of contention for quite some time. But let's take a look here at what they say. They say an anonymous source linked to Naughty Dog Incorporated reached out to us with the following message regarding The Last of Us 2 gameplay footage leak, saying, "I don't doubt even for a moment that this leak came from the studio. The Last of Us Part 2 is very divisive, and as you can imagine, some of the team aren't really thrilled to be working on the game." The source goes on to say how stale the work environment has been at Naughty Dog and how so many people have had to bite their tongues because of cancel culture is very much alive in the studio. Many people would agree with me that this has been one of the worst projects they've ever had to work on. And that's not just because some people disagree with the plot. Even though some team members are Christians and don't necessarily agree with the game's message, they are also professionals who can put their personal politics aside to get the job done. What really sucks about this is the working environment. The team is very much divided on the game. Even voicing our concerns on its story will upset certain individuals. It usually results in said person being called closed-minded or even phobic, or in some such nonsense. Some people literally have to bite their tongues or fear losing their jobs, even their careers, to an outrage mob. Look, here's the thing with that. If you know anything about how the games industry works, and you know anything about the culture in game development and gaming in general over the span of the last roughly 7 years, you know that this is an actual legitimate fear. I am not making that up. It is a legitimate fear inside gaming, and it's something a lot of people have to deal with. If they're not all ideologically left-leaning, there's a lot of conservatives in gaming that are not allowed to voice their opinions simply because it doesn't fit the mold of where things are right now. Now, the source goes on to allege that the high turnover in staff is because of the reasons mentioned above. We're talking about 70%. What's really sad is that nobody's allowed to talk about any of this. Many employees have left Naughty Dog because in-house politics, and they are under strict NDA and absolutely cannot discuss the studio's production practice secrecies. Now, Naughty Dog Incorporated has a high turnover rate of 70%, which skyrocketed around the time The Last of Us Part 2 went into production. Our source claims to have been corroborated by a former Naughty Dog animator, Jonathan Cooper, who left them in early October of last year. Now, this is what Jonathan has to say. This is an article that came out last year. Former Naughty Dog animator claims the studio has a reputation for severe crunch and high turnover. Jonathan Cooper, an industry veteran who left Naughty Dog last October, penned a lengthy thread on Twitter in which he revealed that the studio threatened to withhold his final paycheck until he signed a document that required him to keep the studio's production practices a secret. Cooper claimed that Naughty Dog relented after he proved that its demand was illegal. Sure as hell feels that way. But it goes on to say on Twitter that there are Naughty Dog stories that are worse than this. But like everything on my Twitter, I'm focusing on animation. For The Last of Us 2 fans, the game should turn out great with industry-leading animation. I would just not recommend anyone work at Naughty Dog until they prioritize talent retention. Ultimately, Naughty Dog's linear games have a formula and they focus test the shit out of them. While talented, their success is due in large part to Sony's deep pockets, funding delays, rather than skill alone. A more senior team would have shipped Last of Us Part 2 a year ago. And that is something to consider here. We've been hearing all these stories about the crunch time and everything else and how it's a problem. But not only that, we had this story coming out last year too. A former Naughty Dog employee says he was fired after filing a sexual harassment complaint. This is coming from David Ballard, an environmental artist who worked at Naughty Dog for 2 different stints between 2009 and 2016. And he wrote on social media over the weekend that he was the victim of sexual harassment by a lead at the Sony-owned PlayStation studio, best known for Uncharted and The Last of Us. Ballard first wrote the statements on Friday in his private Facebook, but they did not gain widespread attention until he took it to Twitter on Saturday, saying, "In late 2015, I was sexually harassed at Naughty Dog by a lead. My work environment became extremely toxic afterward. In February 2016, I had a mental breakdown at work and Sony PlayStation HR became involved. When I told them about the harassment, they ended the call and fired me the next day. They cited the company was moving in a different direction and my job was no longer needed. They tried to silence me by offering me $20,000 if I signed a letter agreeing to the termination, as well as to not discuss it with anyone. I declined to sign and I have been unemployed for 17 months since." Which is absolutely crazy that this is what this guy went through. But it's not only that. Internal people, They are even coming out against it, but they can't say it publicly. This is coming from a Jason Schreier article over on Kotaku, and as much as I don't like Schreier's politics, the dude's a good journalist, so give him credit there. He wrote this article just a couple weeks ago before he left Kotaku, saying, as Naughty Dog crunches on The Last of Us 2, developers wonder how much longer this approach can last. And this segment is from the very end of the article, where he says, yet there are those developers, some of whom still work at Naughty Dog today, who say that there's part of them that actually wishes the game would fail. A critical flop might help show Naughty Dog that this isn't the best way to make games, that this level of sacrifice isn't necessary, that maybe the project isn't worth losing all of these people, that perhaps no matter how many Game of the Year nominations they win or how high their Metacritic scores climb, all the individual hairs on Joel's eyebrow or the grains of sand in a burlap sack just aren't worth the cost. And yeah, I mean, we know about this, right? We know about this. So then the question becomes, where is the catalyst of this problem coming from? And I want to put it to Neil Druckman right here. Now, he's the creative head at Naughty Dog, coming on in with The Last of Us and then taking over Uncharted and now doing The Last of Us Part 2. And his politics, I believe, are what right now is causing a lot of the division that we're seeing coming out of Naughty Dog, because people may not agree, as we learned with some of the things in the game, but that with the corporate crunch and probably an unchained Druckman is what's causing the problems. I would say that maybe one of the first things we heard about this was a couple weeks ago when this article dropped saying The Last of Us 2 villains are reportedly homophobic Christians. And this did trigger a lot of people. It really did. And if you look at the article that was before, coming from the same publication, by the way, from Sausage Roll, it does seem to be that maybe this is a reason why this person leaked all the footage, or a disgruntled employee is why it was behind it. But not only that, talking back to Uncharted 4 about inclusivity and diversiveness of characters, this is what Druckman said in an interview. It says here, Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us director Neil Druckman is hopeful that Naughty Dog's future games can do more in the area of character diversity. In a wide-ranging interview, Druckman said it is absolutely important that characters in Naughty Dog games are women and people of color. He added that it wasn't until recently that he realized one of the core pillars of game development, alongside gameplay, graphics, and story, should be diversity. I've been talking more and more about this recently with the team. When you make a game, you have these different pillars that you're trying to balance, he said. It's graphics, it's gameplay, it's story. You're trying not to let any one pillar overwhelm the other. You're trying to keep all of this stuff in your mind, like how does it all work together? Recently, I realized that there's this other pillar of diversity that's just as important as any of these other pillars. I've kind of empowered people on the team to have made this their top priority. Now, there are people out there that are going to argue that this is crap, that diversity is, don't ever do it. Look, I'm fine with diversity, but when it takes a paramount viewpoint over the story, that's when you start to really question the motives. And then there's also Anita Sarkeesian. And if you know anything about Anita Sarkeesian or my history with Anita Sarkeesian, you kind of know where this whole thing is going. And the two of them are close. In fact, he introduced her at an award show at the GDC back in 2014. And, well, see it for yourself.
The Ambassador Award honors an individual who has helped the game industry advance to a better place. Anita Sarkeesian's work has done just that. A feminist and a media critic, Anita is a fan of popular culture, and she believes that it is one of the ways in which we learn about ourselves and the world around us. And that part of being a fan is to celebrate characters, stories, and programs that we love, while simultaneously being critical of the myths and representations that media can perpetuate. Anita saw an opportunity to create, in her words, a space where feminism was easy to engage with in an accessible way. While still in grad school, earning her master's in social and political thought from York University, she created Feminist Frequency, a video web series that explores the representation of women in pop culture narratives. Her early videos focused on popular film, TV shows, and even advertising, focusing on deconstructing stereotypes, patterns, and tropes associated with women. On May 17, 2012, she opened a Kickstarter campaign to create Tropes versus Women in Video Games, a series that would cover the tropes within our own industry. She asked for a modest $6,000, which was easily funded within 24 hours. Unfortunately, the Kickstarter also triggered a rather large online intimidation and harassment campaign aimed directly at her. Her social media outlets were attacked with varying degrees of hateful and misogynistic comments, imagery, and even threats. Instead of ignoring the attacks, she documented and made them public, exposing the kind of vile internet behavior that is often directed at women and all too often dismissed. The attacks brought further attention to the Kickstarter, and backers came to its support in droves. By the end of its run, the Kickstarter netted roughly $159,000 from 7,000 backers. Anita has since become a spokesperson for the dangers of online harassment and gave a TED Talk that has close to 500,000 views. Her story has been covered in publications like the New York Times and The Guardian. After months of research and work, the first video of Tropes vs. Women was released on March 7, 2013. It has garnered over 1.8 million views. Game reviews and editorials constantly reference her work when discussing the treatment of women in games. Many developers now have a greater understanding of character tropes and the shortcomings they can lead to. I know for me, Anita's work was highly influential in my approach to writing for The Last of Us, greatly improving its story. With the amount of harassment she still receives on a daily basis, including some today, I've often wondered, why keep doing this? And having discussed games with her on several occasions now, the answer became abundantly clear. She loves video games. She's so passionate about them that she feels they're worth fighting for. It is my honor to present the Game Developers Ambassador Award to Anita Sarkeesian.
So the two of them go back quite a long ways, and they've been friends, and I think it's possible that Anita has influenced him a bit more than a lot of people, myself included, would like. I have no problem, I just want to make this abundantly clear, with diverse characters, diverse casting, any of those things. But when there's an agenda attached to it, other than trying to tell a good story, I do take notice. And when it comes to Anita, that's been her entire game now since 2012. So 8 years she's been at this. And the reason why I bring it up is there was an interview with Druckman a while back, right before the release of Uncharted 4, where he talked about this. And he says, the interview asks, "You've said in the past you've been influenced by Anita Sarkeesian's feminist frequency videos and the larger conversation about diversity and representation in games. How did that affect Uncharted 4? Druckman says, "When I'm introducing and describing a new character to our lead character concept artists, constantly she will ask, 'What if it was a girl?' And I'm like, 'Oh, I didn't think about that. Let me think. Does that affect or change anything?' No? Cool. That's different. Let's do it." Initially, in the epilogue, it was Nate's son. Something similar happened with the mansion they go into. It was an old English guy's house, and she asked, "Well, what if it was a woman?" You have some sexist focus testers who were really upset about Nadine beating up Nate, and it really upset them at the end when it was Nate's daughter, to the point of where we had to ask one guy to leave. In his core, it just affected him. He was cursing, "Not you, Naughty Dog. God damn it, I guess I'm done with Uncharted. If you guys ever make another one with his daughter, this effing BS." And I was like, wow, why does that matter? And the truth of it is, it doesn't matter. Some people don't want it. Some people do want it. You're never going to please everyone 100%. But we can start to see his politics here and how he approaches it and how he's influenced and who he's influenced by. And when you think about that and you look at the core context of what these spoilers are, you can start to see where he was trying to write to maybe target a certain demographic, maybe to say a specific message. I don't want to go too far into the spoilers. Unfortunately, they were spoiled for me, bastards. But that is kind of where Druckman stands on a personal level. His politics probably heavily influenced a lot of the development team, and it maybe didn't jive or mesh well with the people who have left. The 70% turnover rate, the people who are forced into NDAs, everything else, the stuff that we don't know, that we only know a little bit of. I think a lot of it can be traced back to him having the control. Even the other guy in the picture here, Bruce Staley, who was a co-director on The Last of Us, worked on Uncharted 4, did the other Uncharted games. He left the company after 17 years, after they released Uncharted 4, because it just didn't feel personal to him anymore. And I wonder how much of Druckman's power, because Druckman got all the praise, Druckman got all the attention, had to do with that particular move. Granted, I don't know any of that. That's simply all speculation at this point, but that's just my own personal take on it. And when I think about the leaks themselves and whether or not the leaks are going to end up impacting the sale of the game, it comes out in a month and a half. By then, a lot of people will probably have forgotten about this, and it's probably still going to pull in an absolute fair amount of money. People are going to buy this. We are still amidst this whole pandemic situation, and people are looking for more things to play, and we don't know specifically if things will be reopened by the middle of June. I'm assuming that they probably will be. But whoever leaked this stuff, and this is footage from an earlier build back in February, I believe, is what they had said. This is definitely a disgruntled employee. This is somebody who wanted to fundamentally hurt not only Naughty Dog, but Sony. And now this is Sony's move to react. They reacted by moving the release date, by pinpointing a release date finally. That's what they did. But we don't know who is behind this, and I don't think we ever truly will know who is behind this unless that person comes forward or unless that person gets outed, and that's entirely possible. You know, there's no honor among thieves sort of thing. We'll have to wait and see. At the end of the day, I don't know if this is going to impact the game or not. I don't know if this is going to end up really cutting into their financials. I think people are going to buy it. I don't think the leaks are that bad. There's no context to them at this point. I don't care if it is a Christian cult. People out there are going to get mad. Fine. I don't care. You know, I mean, we've seen this kind of stuff before. It's not necessarily the most original trope out there. I mean, look at The Mist and how that whole thing played out. People, when they're afraid, they will turn to spirituality or strong personality people who can lead them. And those aren't always good people. We've known this. Cults are a reality. Cults have been around for a long time. So getting upset that it's going to be this weird, crazy cult people is not the end of the world. The question then becomes, how does the story play out? How does the game play out and everything else in the process? The unfortunate truth is the way the internet operates is that if it's not shown to you in its entirety completely and you're left to your own devices to try to figure out what's being said or what's being done, oftentimes people are going to err on the side of caution, and that can easily be influenced by people who are just looking to push their own agenda rather than play it themselves. However, I do leave it to you, your thoughts and your opinions on this one. Let me know down in the comments below. I look forward to your thoughts, really do. Be sure to like the video, please comment, subscribe, hit that bell, all that jazz. I'll talk to you guys all later. Have yourself a great day. Thank you again, and peace out.